Wednesday at 9 on BBC One and iPlayer.
Now on BBC One, the Saturday lunchtime news with Rajini Vaidyanathan.
Good afternoon. A minute's silence has been held in the Czech Republic for the 14 people shot dead by a student at a university in Prague. Thursday's attack also left dozens injured. The Czech Prime Minister has described the pain and sorrow of an entire society just before Christmas. The gunman killed himself when surrounded by police. From Prague, Sarah Rainsford sent this report.
A nation paused today to remember the victims of an attack people here can't make sense of, that has brought pain and suffering. Church bells rang out across the Czech Republic to mark the moment, to honour those killed when a student attacked his own university, shooting in the corridors and classrooms. So far, we know 3 of the dead, including Lenka Hlavkova, a teacher who was 49. Here at the arts faculty that was attacked, some have personal connections to the victims. A friend of these women survived by locking herself into a classroom to hide.
She cowered under the table. I saw her yesterday and felt sorry for her. She was still shaking.
Images from a body camera show the police hunt for the gunman inside Charles University. At this point, the 24-year-old was prowling the corridors above. We're told most of his victims were female, but we have no idea of his motive. In the end, he turned his gun on himself. Many people were seriously injured, carried out of the building by police. So I asked the Interior Minister, did he think mistakes had been made?
When I see really the timeline of this crime, I really don't see any empty places where the police could work better than they did.
This attack has not only brought horror here to Prague, it is a national tragedy. There are still many questions to answer about how exactly it was possible and how to prevent anything like it in the future.
The mass shooting is the worst this country has ever known, and it targeted young students and teachers who should have been returning home to their families now for Christmas. Sarah Rainsford, BBC News, Prague.
The grandmother of Alex Batty has spoken of how she felt utterly betrayed by her daughter and ex-husband when they took the schoolboy abroad. In an interview with The Sun, Susan Caruana said she feared she would never see her grandson again. Our reporter Nick Johnson has more.
Susan Caruana waited 6 long years for this message from her grandson, Alex Batty, their first direct contact since he failed to return from a holiday in Spain with his mother and grandfather. Now back in the UK, Alex and his grandma have been speaking to the Sun newspaper, describing the last time they spoke over the phone in 2017 from a beach in Spain.
I said to him, "You are coming home on Saturday, aren't you?" And then I heard in the background his mother telling him to put down the phone. All the phones were being switched off. All communications was cut. And I felt so betrayed. And I was absolutely devastated.
Alex spent the next few years living a nomadic lifestyle in France and Spain with his mother and grandfather. During the whole 6 years, Susan told The Sun, "I never knew if they were dead or alive." With no school or formal education, Alex said he resorted to books.
I used to read Harry Potter. I've probably read it about 20 times in complete order. I used to carry them around everywhere I went, the entire box set.
Alex said he'd wanted to come back to the UK for some time, and earlier this month slipped out of this French farmhouse, leaving his mother and grandfather behind. After being picked up by a van driver, he got in touch with his grandma and was brought home, and says he's still pinching himself.
the first few days I was living with her, every night I went to sleep, I thought that once I'd gone to sleep, I'd wake back up in France.
Greater Manchester Police say officers have interviewed Alex since his return to Oldham and as a result have changed the status of their investigation from a missing persons inquiry to a criminal investigation into alleged child abduction. Nick Johnson, BBC News.
The latest three-day strike by junior doctors in England ended this morning, but there's no sign of a breakthrough in their long-running dispute with the government over pay. Ministers say demands for a 35% increase to make up for years of below-inflation settlements is unaffordable. Our health correspondent Dominic Hughes has more.
There have now been 28 days of strike action by junior doctors in England since they first walked out at the beginning of March.
What do we want? Pay. When do we want it? Now.
Even before this latest round of industrial action, NHS England estimated that at least 1.1 million appointments and procedures have been cancelled or rescheduled thanks to a round of strikes this year, including those by other staff such as nurses and ambulance workers.
Morning, Karen.
Good morning.
How are you?
At the Norfolk and Norwich University Hospital earlier this week, consultant doctors were covering the work of their more junior colleagues during the strike. But the NHS is already seeing the impact of winter pressures, and there's deep concern about what happens if this strike continues.
It will mean widespread cancellation of planned elective operating at a time when the NHS waiting list is at record highs and trusts are doing everything they can to try to, get through and eat into the backlog of patients waiting for operations, but also the hugely important work in emergency departments, intensive care, maternity, and so on. Those are areas that are of particular importance in terms of patient safety and quality.
The strike by junior doctors in England centres around pay. Earlier this month, an offer of a pay rise averaging 3% from January was being discussed on top of the average of nearly 9% junior doctors received in April. But the BMA said that wasn't enough. Junior doctors had asked for an extra 35% to make up for below-inflation pay rises since 2008. And unless there's some dramatic movement over Christmas, junior doctors will strike for 6 more days at the start of January, traditionally the busiest time for the health service. Ministers say this latest round of strike action has caused significant disruption. But the door to further talks remains open if the January walkout is cancelled. As things stand, that seems an unlikely prospect. Dominic Hughes, BBC News.
Now, today's expected to be one of the busiest shopping days of the year, with many of us still planning to make a last-minute dash for presents or food. So have things already reached fever pitch on the high street? Well, Eunice Muller's in Manchester city centre for us. Eunice, how's it looking where you are?
I have to say, Manchester city centre has looked busier. It could be the rain, but it could also be those rising costs that many people are facing, not only here in Manchester but elsewhere. Certainly the local authority has told me they've noticed people being super conscious about that and perhaps choosing carefully what they spend their money on and not going the extra mile. They've had Christmas markets here, they've been very busy, but the British Retail Consortium have said today it's been a rough few months for retailers, the elevated cost of living, those rising mortgage costs, and retailers are hoping that will change today and tomorrow, and that they will see a bumper trading weekend and perhaps the best figures that they could have all year. Certainly there are sale signs on in windows, and for shoppers there may be that last-minute bargain.
Eunice Muller there. Now, following the pandemic, charities training guide dogs faced a shortage of volunteers to raise puppies. But now hundreds of people have applied to help foster guide dog puppies. Our correspondent Sean Dilley's been finding out how they've been changing lives for the better.
Hello!
Reintroducing Rebel.
Oh, that's marvellous, marvellous. Oh, now, Rebel is on the good list, isn't he?
He's on the very good list, and by summer 2024, it's hoped he'll be on the Guide Dogs Ready to Train list.
He's an absolute little treasure, really.
Earlier this year in June, we met the Niblock family from Suffolk. They had just welcomed retriever lab Rebel.
We're hoping he's rebel with a cause, though.
Hello, you. They volunteered to raise a guide dog puppy after BBC Breakfast shared my last working walk with guide dog Sammy.
Sammy is more important to me, and he always will be.
They were among thousands who stepped forward after we highlighted pandemic delays and a national shortage of volunteers, leaving many blind and visually impaired people like me without a guide dog. It's been 6 months since we last caught up with the Niblocks. This visit to the Cambridge Christmas market with puppy raisers Eve and Jess looks fun because it is fun. Their young student is learning without realising it. For Rebel and the Niblock family, a very merry Christmas day is set, and it will be a Christmas day they'll never forget.
He's such a big part of our family, and we love him to bits. But knowing that he's going to change someone's life, and the outcome that we're going to get from the end of it, that's what we've got to concentrate on.
The Niblock family aren't the only ones whose Christmas will be centred around guide dogs. Each of the 700 people here at the charity's Christmas Carol event in Manchester Cathedral have their own stories.
And I used to go to bed on a night time wishing that I wasn't going to wake up in the morning because I just felt there was no life to live anymore. And to go from that place to a place now where I say I live my best blind life.
Today I've come here with my buddy dog, Quince. He is fantastic and very hairy. He really helps me with my confidence. He's a life changer.
For guide dog puppy Rebel, more socialisation and training lies ahead. With the love and support of the Niblock family and maybe a smattering of seasonal magic, by this time next year, Guide Dog Rebel could make someone's Christmas wish come true. Sean Dilley, BBC News.
Well, that's all from me. If you want to keep up with the latest, you can join me on the BBC News channel through the afternoon. The next news here on BBC One is at 20 to 6. Bye for now.